The gunshot echoed through the stillness of the Wyoming Territory, sending a flock of startled birds into the crimson sunset sky. Hannah Morgan clutched the worn letter to her chest, watching her last hope collapse before her eyes as the stagecoach disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving her stranded in a land she barely knew. It was 1878, and the promise of a new beginning had drawn Hannah from Boston to the untamed West after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and a tarnished family name. The teaching position waiting in Copper Creek had been her salvation until the stage driver informed her they wouldn't be continuing to that remote settlement for another week due to reports of bandits along the route. "Can't risk the passengers, miss," he'd said gruffly before departing, leaving her at this desolate way station with only her trunk and reticule. Now, as twilight deepened across the vast prairie, Hannah felt the weight of her situation press down upon her. The way station was little more than a ramshackle building with a surly keeper who'd made it clear he had no room for unexpected guests. 5 miles northwest to Whispering Pines, he'd grunted, pointing toward the distant hills. Small town there, might find lodging, 5 miles. Hannah looked down at her city boots, already scuffed from the journey, and at the heavy trunk containing everything she owned in the world. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust, whipping tendrils of her chestnut hair around her face. Night was falling fast, and stories of wolves and worse creatures that roamed the territory after dark flooded her mind. She had no choice. Gathering what strength remained after days of travel, Hannah began to drag her trunk along the rutted dirt path, each step a battle against exhaustion and growing despair. An hour later, darkness had fully descended. The trunk had grown impossibly heavy, and her hands were raw from pulling it. In the distance, a wolf howled, the sound sending ice through her veins. When her boot caught on a rock, sending her sprawling into the dirt, something inside Hannah broke. She fell to her knees in the dirt crying, the culmination of weeks of grief, fear, and exhaustion pouring out of her in great, heaving sobs. Her father's death, the discovery of his gambling debts, the auction of their home, the long journey west, it all crashed down upon her at once, leaving her trembling in the darkness of this foreign land. "You can stand now," a deep voice said from above her. Hannah gasped, scrambling backward, her tears momentarily forgotten. A tall figure on horseback loomed over her, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was how women met their end in the wilderness alone with strangers whose intentions were unknown. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, and as he stepped closer, the moonlight revealed his features. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with a face weathered by sun and wind. A broad-brimmed hat shadowed intense eyes, but there was no menace in his stance. "Name's Isaiah Forrester," he said, his voice carrying the rough cadence of the frontier. "Most folks call me Ike. You're a fair piece from anywhere civilized, madam." Hannah hurriedly wiped her tears away with the back of her hand, mortified to be found in such a state. "Hannah Morgan," she replied, striving for dignity despite her position in the dirt. "The stagecoach left me at the way station. I'm trying to reach Whispering Pines." Ike Forrester surveyed her trunk and her bedraggled appearance with a critical eye, walking alone at night. He asked, disbelief evident in his tone, "That's a good way to feed the coyotes." "I had little choice in the matter," Hannah replied stiffly, rising to her feet and brushing dirt from her skirts. The way station keeper had no accommodations. Something like anger flickered across Ike's face. "Martin never did have much Christian charity." He glanced at the distant hills, then back at Hannah. "Whispering Pines is still 3 miles on. My ranch is closer, just over that ridge. I've got a cabin where my ranch hand's wife stays. She'd welcome the company." Hannah hesitated. Going to a stranger's home went against everything she'd been taught about propriety, but the wilderness around her, with its unknown dangers, suddenly seemed far more threatening than this weathered cowboy. "I wouldn't impose," she began uncertainly. "It's no imposition." Ike was already lifting her trunk with surprising ease. "Out here, folks help each other survive. That's the code of the West." He secured her trunk to his horse, then offered his hand. "Can you ride?" Hannah nodded, remembering leisurely afternoon rides in Boston parks, nothing like mounting this tall, muscular horse under the vast Wyoming sky. With Ike's assistance, she settled behind the saddle, her skirts arranged as modestly as possible around her. "Hold on," he instructed, mounting in front of her. "It's not far." Hannah tentatively placed her hands at his waist, feeling the solid strength of him as the horse moved forward. The scent of leather, horse, and something uniquely masculine surrounded her. Despite her exhaustion and fear, she found herself cataloging the sensations, the rhythm of the horse beneath them, the warmth of Isaiah Forrester against the chill night, the vastness of the star-filled sky above. As promised, the journey was short. Lights appeared in the distance, a cluster of buildings nestled against the protective embrace of a ridge. As they drew closer, Hannah made out a substantial main house, several outbuildings, and a smaller cabin set slightly apart. A woman emerged from the main house as they approached, lantern held high. "Ike, that you?" "It's me, Martha," he called back. "Found a stranded traveler on the road. Miss Morgan here needs a place for the night." The woman hurried forward as Ike helped Hannah dismount. Martha turned out to be a plump, motherly figure with kind eyes and gray, streaked hair tucked beneath a simple cap. She clucked her tongue sympathetically as Ike explained Hannah's situation. "Poor lamb, abandoned on the road like that. You come right in and have some stew. You look half-starved." She took Hannah's arm gently. "We'll put you in the cabin. It's small but clean and snug." Hannah found herself guided toward the main house, Ike following with her trunk. The warmth and light spilling from the doorway seemed like paradise after the dark journey. Inside, the house was simply furnished but comfortable, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a long wooden table at the center of the main room. "My brother Caleb's already turned in," Martha explained, "but we can meet properly in the morning. You just sit and eat now." Before Hannah could properly register what was happening, she was seated at the table with a bowl of fragrant stew before her and a cup of hot coffee at her elbow. Ike sat opposite, watching with quiet intensity as she took her first tentative spoonful. The food was simple but delicious, and Hannah realized how hungry she truly was. For several minutes, the only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the occasional clink of spoons against bowls. Martha bustled about, preparing the cabin, occasionally asking questions that Hannah answered between bites. "Teaching position in Copper Creek." Martha nodded approvingly. "They're lucky to get an educated lady. Most teachers out here are just farm girls who can read a bit." "I'm qualified," Hannah said, feeling a need to establish her credentials. "I taught at a ladies' seminary in Boston for 3 years. Ike raised an eyebrow. "Boston's a long way from Wyoming Territory. What brings you all this way, Miss Morgan?" The question was direct, perhaps even intrusive by Eastern standards, but Hannah sensed no malice behind it, only genuine curiosity. Still, she hesitated to reveal the full truth of her circumstances. "My father passed recently," she said carefully. "I found myself in need of a new situation." Ike studied her for a moment longer, his eyes a striking shade of blue, she now noticed seeming to see more than she wished to reveal. But he simply nodded. "Sorry for your loss. Losing family's never easy." The simple statement, offered without pity or judgment, unexpectedly brought tears to Hannah's eyes again. She blinked them away quickly, focusing on her meal. When she had finished eating, Martha showed her to the promised cabin. It was indeed small, just a single room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small stove, but it was immaculately clean. Her trunk had already been placed at the foot of the bed. "There's fresh water in the pitcher," Martha said, lighting the bedside lamp. "Privy's out back. I've put some of my night clothes on the bed there. They'll be big on you, but clean. We'll get your things sorted in the morning." Hannah turned to thank her hostess, but found herself engulfed in a warm, motherly embrace instead. The unexpected kindness after so many weeks of hardship nearly undid her composure again. "There now," Martha said, patting her back. "You're safe here, rest easy, and things will look brighter by daylight." When Martha had gone, Hannah changed quickly into the borrowed nightgown and slipped beneath the quilt. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she stared at the unfamiliar shadows on the cabin ceiling. The events of the day replayed in her mind, particularly the moment when Ike Forrester had appeared like some frontier guardian angel. She should feel nothing but gratitude, she told herself firmly. Yet there was something about the cowboy that unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a manner that made her acutely aware of herself as a woman. It had been in the intensity of his gaze, the careful respect with which he'd treated her, the solid strength she'd felt when riding behind him. Hannah rolled onto her side, chiding herself for such inappropriate thoughts. She was a respectable teacher, not some romantic heroine in a dime novel. Tomorrow she would thank the Forresters for their hospitality and continue to Whispering Pines, where she would wait for the stage to Copper Creek as planned. With that sensible resolution firmly in mind, she finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. Morning arrived with the crowing of a rooster and light streaming through the cabin's single window. For a moment, Hannah was disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings confusing her sleep-muddled mind. Then memory returned, the stagecoach abandoning her, her desperate walk, falling to her knees in despair, and the cowboy who had come to her rescue. A soft knock at the door roused her fully. "Miss Morgan, I've brought some hot water for washing," Martha called. Hannah hastily smoothed her hair and pulled the quilt to her chin. "Please come in." Martha entered with a steaming pitcher and a bundle of clothing. "Good morning, dear. I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Hannah replied, though in truth her sleep had been fitful, filled with strange dreams of endless prairie and shadowy figures. "You've been so kind, I don't know how to repay you." Martha waved away her thanks. "Nonsense. We're Christians here, helping travelers is our duty and pleasure." She set down the pitcher and unfolded the bundle. "I've brought one of my dresses. We'll have to pin it up some, but it'll do until yours is washed." The dress was a simple calico in a faded blue pattern, clearly well worn but clean and serviceable. Hannah accepted it gratefully. Her own traveling dress was grimy from the journey and her fall in the dirt. "Breakfast will be ready when you are," Martha added. "Ike's already seen to the morning chores and Caleb's eager to meet our guest." After Martha left, Hannah washed quickly and dressed in the borrowed clothing. The dress hung loosely on her slender frame, but with judicious pinning and a borrowed apron tied snugly around her waist, she managed to make herself presentable. Her hair, however, was another matter. Without her usual pins and combs, the best she could manage was a simple braid. Feeling somewhat self-conscious in her makeshift attire, Hannah made her way to the main house. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. The Forrester ranch was larger and more prosperous than she'd initially thought. Besides the main house and her cabin, there was a substantial barn, a corral with several horses, a chicken coop, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the rolling grassland that stretched toward the mountains. Inside the house, the scene was one of domestic harmony. Martha stood at the stove, turning bacon in a large iron skillet. A man who could only be Caleb sat at the table, his resemblance to Martha marking them as siblings, and at the far end of the room, washing his hands in a basin, was Ike. He looked different in daylight, younger perhaps, though no less imposing. His dark hair was damp from washing, and he'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline. When he turned and saw her, something flickered in those blue eyes that made Hannah's heart skip unexpectedly. "Good morning, Miss Morgan," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I hope the cabin suited you." "Perfectly, thank you," she replied, fighting an unfamiliar sensation of shyness. "I'm deeply grateful for your assistance last night, Mr. Forrester." "Ike," he corrected, drying his hands on a towel. "We don't stand on ceremony much out here." "Then I must be Hannah," she said, surprising herself with the offer of such familiarity to a man she barely knew. Caleb rose from his chair, introducing himself with a friendly handshake. Unlike his ranch hand, Caleb Forrester was shorter and stockier, with a genial face creased by laugh lines. "Welcome to Forrester Ranch, Miss Hannah. Any plans to visit become a rescue mission are always welcome." The breakfast that followed was unlike anything Hannah had experienced in Boston. The food was plentiful and hearty: eggs, bacon, biscuits dripping with butter and honey, and the conversation flowed easily. Caleb and Martha did most of the talking, filling Hannah in on the history of their ranch and the surrounding area. Ike contributed occasionally, but seemed content to observe, those penetrating eyes often resting on Hannah in a way that made her intensely aware of herself. "Whispering Pines has a decent boarding house," Caleb was saying. "Mrs. Tilson runs a tight ship, no card playing or drinking allowed under her roof. She'll treat you right until the stage comes through for Copper Creek." "I appreciate the recommendation," Hannah said politely, though the thought of yet another temporary lodging before reaching her final destination was wearying. "I should try to get there today, if possible." "I'll take you," Ike said, the first words he'd spoken in some time. "After breakfast." "Have business in town anyway." "That would be very kind," Hannah acknowledged, both relieved and oddly disappointed that her time at the ranch would be so brief. "Nonsense," Martha interjected firmly. "The girl just arrived, exhausted and half-starved. She needs rest before traveling again, even if it's only a short distance." She turned to Hannah. "Stay with us today and tomorrow, dear. Let me wash and press your clothes properly. You can head to town fresh and rested." Hannah hesitated. The offer was tempting. Every muscle in her body ached from yesterday's ordeal, and the thought of another immediate journey, even a short one, was daunting. Yet she was acutely conscious of imposing on these strangers' generosity. "I couldn't possibly," she began. "You could and you should," Martha insisted. "Besides, it's Sunday. We don't do business on the Lord's Day, and neither does anyone in Whispering Pines worth knowing. Even the boarding house won't take new guests today." This practical consideration settled the matter. Hannah found herself agreeing to stay until Monday, secretly relieved at the prospect of a day's respite. "That's settled then," Martha said with satisfaction. "Now, Ike, if you're not heading to town today after all, that fence in the north pasture still needs mending." Ike nodded, rising from the table. "I'll see to it." He paused, looking at Hannah. "Perhaps Miss Morgan would like to see more of the ranch later, if she's rested enough." Before Hannah could respond, Martha answered for her. "An excellent idea. The girl needs fresh air after being cooped up in that stagecoach, but let her rest this morning, mind." And so Hannah's day was arranged without much input from herself, a circumstance that might have annoyed her in Boston, but here seemed part of the natural order of things. After helping Martha clear the breakfast dishes, despite the older woman's protests, Hannah returned to the cabin to unpack necessities from her trunk. Among her possessions was a small leather-bound volume of poetry, Tennyson's works, a gift from her father on her 16th birthday. Hannah ran her fingers over the worn binding, thinking of her father as he had been before gambling and drink, had claimed him intelligent, kind, with a love of literature he had passed on to his only child. A wave of homesickness washed over her. Not for Boston itself, but for the sense of belonging, of knowing one's place in the world. Here in this vast territory she was adrift, a stranger in a landscape both beautiful and terrifying in its immensity. Hannah settled on the cabin's small porch with her book, intending to read, but instead found her gaze drawn to the activities around the ranch. Caleb was visible near the barn, examining what appeared to be a sick calf. Martha hung laundry on a line stretched between two posts, the white sheets billowing like sails in the prairie wind. And in the distance, moving along the fence line on horseback, was Ike. Even at this distance, there was something compelling about his figure: the straight back, the easy confidence with which he handled his horse. Hannah watched, telling herself she was merely observing ranch life out of curiosity, until Martha called her in to help prepare the midday meal. The remainder of the morning passed pleasantly in domestic tasks. Hannah found unexpected comfort in the simple rhythm of ranch life, so different from the rigid social schedule she'd known in Boston. Martha proved to be not only kind but intelligent and well-read, surprising Hannah with references to books and current events. "Just because we live far from cities doesn't mean we're ignorant," Martha said with a twinkle in her eye when Hannah expressed surprise. Caleb subscribes to newspapers from back east, and we trade books with neighbors. Winter evenings are long here reading passes the time. After the midday meal, Ike made good on his offer to show Hannah the ranch. He appeared at the cabin door with 2 saddled horses, the smaller one a gentle-looking mare with a white blaze down her nose. "You ride astride?" he asked without preamble. Hannah blinked at the directness of the question. In Boston, ladies rode side saddle on gentle paths. But she had a sudden vision of herself attempting to navigate the rolling prairie perched sideways on horseback, and nearly laughed aloud. "I can learn," she said with more confidence than she felt. The corner of Ike's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Daisy here's patient. She'll forgive your mistakes." With that less than reassuring comment, he helped Hannah mount. The sensation of sitting astride a horse was strange at first, her borrowed dress hiking up to reveal her ankles and calves. But there was an undeniable freedom to it that side saddle had never allowed. "Keep your heels down," Ike instructed, adjusting her posture with a brief touch at her back that sent an unexpected warmth through her. "And hold the reins like this, not too tight. Let her feel your guidance, not your control." Once he was satisfied with her position, Ike mounted his own horse, a powerful black stallion that dwarfed Hannah's mare. "We'll start easy," he promised, "just around the home pasture." The easy ride turned out to be more challenging than Hannah anticipated. The terrain was uneven, nothing like the manicured paths she was accustomed to, and riding astride required muscles she hadn't known she possessed. But there was also an exhilarating freedom to it, the wind in her face, the powerful animal moving beneath her, the endless sky stretching above. Ike proved to be a patient teacher, offering quiet corrections and occasional words of praise. As they rode, he pointed out features of the ranch and the surrounding land, the creek that provided water year-round, the protected valley where cattle sheltered in winter storms, the distant peaks that marked the boundary of his property. "How long have you lived here?" Hannah asked as they paused to let the horses drink from a clear stream. "Born here," Ike replied, dismounting with easy grace. He came to help Hannah down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "My father claimed this land when it was just wilderness, built the first cabin with his own hands." Hannah's feet touched the ground, but Ike's hands lingered a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. She found herself suddenly flustered, aware of their isolation and the impropriety of being alone with a man she barely knew. "Your parents?" she asked, focusing on the conversation to regain her composure. "Are they?" "Passed on," Ike said, leading the horses to the water. "Pa 8 years ago, Ma the year after. Seemed like she couldn't find reason to stay once he was gone." The simple statement held a depth of feeling that caught at Hannah's heart. "I'm sorry, it's difficult to lose those we love." Ike glanced at her sharply, as if hearing something beneath her words. "Your father was his passing recent, 3 months ago," Hannah admitted. "It was unexpected." This wasn't entirely true. Her father's decline had been visible to anyone with eyes to see, but the final heart seizure had come suddenly. "And your mother?" "Gone since I was 12. Influenza." Ike nodded, understanding in his eyes. "So you're alone now." It wasn't a question, but Hannah answered anyway. "Yes, there was no family to take me in, and circumstances made it necessary to seek employment far from home." She'd said more than she intended, revealing vulnerabilities she usually kept hidden. Something about Isaiah Forrester made her guard drop in a way that was both frightening and oddly freeing. He didn't press for details, seeming to sense her reluctance to elaborate. Instead, he helped her remount and led her to a high point overlooking the ranch and the town beyond. "Whispering Pines," he said, gesturing to the cluster of buildings in the distance. "Not much to look at compared to Boston, I expect." The town was indeed small, a single main street with perhaps 24 buildings, the church steeple its highest point. Yet there was something appealing about its nestled position in the valley, smoke rising from chimneys even on this warm day. "It looks peaceful," Hannah said truthfully. Ike made a noncommittal sound. Can also be as full of trouble as any place where men gather." He turned in the saddle to look at her directly. Town's growing. Talk of a school starting next year. They'll need a teacher. Hannah caught his meaning immediately. I've signed a contract with Copper Creek, she reminded him. Contracts can be changed, Ike said with a shrug. Just something to think on. The idea was startling that she might consider changing her plans based on less than a day's acquaintance with this place and these people. Yet Hannah couldn't deny that some part of her responded to the suggestion, imagining a life in this wide open country, closer to the Forrester Ranch and its inhabitants. The remainder of the ride passed with lighter conversation. Ike, once he began talking, proved to be knowledgeable not just about ranching but about the natural world around them. He pointed out plants and their uses, identified bird calls, and explained the subtle signs that told of changing weather. By the time they returned to the ranch yard, the sun was lowering toward the western mountains, painting the landscape in gold and amber hues. Hannah was sore in places she hadn't known could be sore, but also invigorated by the experience. You did well, Ike said as he helped her dismount for the final time. Most Eastern ladies would have complained more. Hannah laughed, surprising herself with the easy sound. Who says I won't complain tomorrow when every muscle is protesting? That almost smile appeared again, warming his eyes. Fair point. Martha has a liniment that helps with riding pains. I'll tell her to bring you some. Their hands were still connected from the dismount, Hannah realized suddenly. She withdrew hers with a murmured thanks, conscious of a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Sunday dinner at the Forrester Ranch was a more formal affair than breakfast had been. Martha had changed into a good dress, and both men wore clean shirts with string ties. Hannah was grateful that Martha had washed and pressed her own traveling dress, allowing her to appear somewhat more presentable. The conversation around the table was animated, with Caleb sharing news heard from a passing cattle buyer about events in the territorial capital. Martha added her own insights, revealing a sharp political mind that would have surprised Hannah's Boston acquaintances, who believed women should concern themselves only with domestic matters. What do you think, Miss Hannah? Caleb asked after describing a dispute over water rights in a neighboring county. Coming from the East, you must have different views on how such things should be handled. Hannah, who had been following the discussion with interest, was startled to be directly addressed on such a matter. Well, I confess I haven't given much thought to water rights specifically, but it seems to me that any resource essential to survival should be managed with the common good in mind, not just individual profit. Hear that, Ike, Caleb said with a grin. The lady's taking your side against old man Wilson. Ike, who had been quietly attentive throughout the meal, nodded slightly. Miss Morgan speaks sense. Wilson's damming of the creek affects 3 downstream ranches. It's not right. The law might not agree, Martha pointed out. Property rights are strong out here. Law's one thing, rights another, Ike said firmly. A man can own land, but he can't own what God sends to nourish it: rain, sun, the seasons. Those belong to all. Hannah was struck by the philosophy underlying his words, so different from the competitive individualism that dominated Eastern thinking. That's a surprisingly communal view, Mr. Forrester. Just practical, Ike replied with a slight shrug. Out here, working together means survival. Going it alone means death, more often than not. The conversation moved on to lighter topics, but Hannah found herself contemplating Ike's words long after the meal had ended. There was more depth to this quiet cowboy than she had initially assumed, a thoughtfulness that intrigued her. That evening, the Forresters invited Hannah to join them in the main house parlor. Caleb read aloud from scripture, his deep voice giving weight to the familiar passages. Then Martha played hymns on a surprisingly well-tuned piano while they all sang. Hannah, who had attended fashionable Boston churches where professional choirs performed elaborate music, found unexpected comfort in the simple devotions. When she finally retired to the cabin, Hannah felt more at peace than she had since her father's death. The Forresters' uncomplicated faith and kindness had touched something within her, a longing for community, and belonging that she hadn't fully acknowledged to herself. As she prepared for bed, Hannah found herself standing at the cabin window, looking out toward the main house where a single lamp still burned. Ike's silhouette moved across the window, briefly tall, straight-backed, unmistakable even in shadow. "This is foolishness," Hannah whispered to herself, turning resolutely away from the window. She had known the man barely a day. That she should feel this strange awareness of him, this pull toward his quiet strength, was nothing but the romantic fancy of an overtired mind. Tomorrow she would go to Whispering Pines as planned, and in a week's time she would be in Copper Creek beginning her new position. Whatever fleeting connection she imagined with Isaiah Forrester would fade with distance and time. Yet as she lay in the narrow bed, sleep eluding her despite her physical exhaustion, Hannah found her thoughts returning again and again to the moment Ike had appeared on the dark road, to the security she had felt riding behind him, to the gentleness with which he had helped her mount and dismount despite his obvious strength. "Foolishness," she repeated more firmly, turning her face into the pillow. But her dreams, when sleep finally claimed her, were filled with vast skies, endless prairie, and a tall figure whose face she could never quite see clearly, always just ahead, beckoning her forward. Monday morning dawned clear and warm, with no hint of the previous night's restlessness. Hannah rose early, determined to make herself useful during her final hours at the ranch. She found Martha already at work in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with practiced motions. "Good morning, dear," Martha greeted her warmly. "Sleep well?" "Very well," Hannah lied smoothly. "May I help with breakfast?" Martha gladly accepted the offer, and soon Hannah was whisking eggs while bacon sizzled in a large skillet. There was something soothing about the domestic task, so different from the intellectual rigors of teaching. "You have a natural touch in the kitchen," Martha observed approvingly. "Many educated ladies lack practical skills." "My mother believed in raising a daughter who could manage a household as well as discuss literature," Hannah explained. "After she died, I took over running our home while Father taught at the university." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "A woman needs both kinds of knowledge out here. Book learning to teach the children, practical skills to survive the hardships." Before Hannah could respond, the door opened and Ike entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and horses. His eyes found Hannah immediately, a flash of something like pleasure crossing his face before his customary reserve returned. "Morning," he said, nodding to both women as he removed his hat. "Stagecoach day in town. We should leave by 9 if you want a secure passage to Copper Creek, Miss Morgan." Reality intruded abruptly on the domestic tranquility of the morning. Hannah's hands stilled on the egg whisk as she was reminded that this brief interlude at Forrester Ranch was ending. She would continue on her journey as planned, leaving behind these people who had shown her such kindness. "Yes, of course," she managed, returning her attention to the eggs. "I'll be ready." Breakfast passed too quickly, filled with practical advice from Martha about the journey ahead and what to expect in Copper Creek. Caleb contributed stories about the town, which he visited occasionally for cattle sales. "Good folk mostly," he assured her. "The mine owner's wife, Mrs. Sullivan, runs the Ladies' Aid Society. She'll take you under her wing, help you get settled." Hannah expressed her gratitude for this information, all the while conscious of Ike's quiet presence at the table. Unlike his brother, he offered no comments about Copper Creek or her future there. When the meal ended, he simply rose and announced he would ready the wagon. Returning to the cabin to gather her belongings, Hannah was surprised to find her traveling dress not only cleaned but mended where it had torn during her fall. Martha had worked some domestic magic on it, pressing out wrinkles and even adding a small reinforcement at the hem. "I can't thank you enough," Hannah told the older woman when she came to return the borrowed clothing. "You've been so kind to a complete stranger." "Strangers are just friends we haven't come to know yet," Martha replied, embracing Hannah warmly. "And you, my dear, are no longer a stranger to this house." The simple declaration brought unexpected tears to Hannah's eyes. In Boston, even after years of acquaintance, many of her social circle had maintained a cool formality. Here, after just 2 days, she was being claimed as a friend. When Hannah emerged from the cabin with her trunk, Ike was waiting with a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. He loaded her trunk efficiently, then offered his hand to help her onto the high seat. The touch of his calloused palm against her sent that now familiar warmth through her again, unsettling in its intensity. Goodbyes were brief but heartfelt. Caleb pressed a package of food for the journey into her hands, and Martha extracted a promise that Hannah would write once she was settled in Copper Creek. Then they were off, the wagon rolling down the rutted track toward Whispering Pines. For the first mile, neither Hannah nor Ike spoke. The rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the creak of the wagon wheels filled the silence. Hannah was acutely aware of the man beside her, the breadth of his shoulders, the capable hands holding the reins, the profile etched against the blue sky. Finally, it was Ike who broke the silence. "You made an impression on Martha. She doesn't take to everyone so quickly." Hannah smiled, touched by this indirect compliment. "She's a remarkable woman. You're fortunate to have her." "Caleb's the fortunate one, she's his sister," Ike pointed out. "I'm just the ranch hand who benefits from her cooking." This modest description of his role surprised Hannah. "Ranch hand, but I thought, isn't it Forrester Ranch?" Ike kept his eyes on the road ahead. "It is. My father founded it, like I told you. But when he died, he left it to me and Caleb jointly. My brother has the head for business, for planning and managing. I'm better with the land itself, the cattle, the physical work." He shrugged slightly. "So that's how we divide it. He's the owner in town. I'm the hand when anyone asks." The arrangement spoke volumes about the relationship between the brothers' mutual respect, each recognizing the other's strengths. Hannah found herself admiring it, so different from the competitive jostling for position she'd observed among Boston's businessmen. "It seems a wise arrangement," she said. "Though I suspect you're more essential to the ranch's success than you let on." A ghost of a smile touched Ike's lips. "Maybe, but don't tell Caleb that he'll expect me to start keeping the books." The jest, unexpected from the serious cowboy, made Hannah laugh. The sound seemed to please Ike, his expression warming as he glanced at her. The remainder of the journey passed more comfortably, the conversation flowing more easily between them. Ike pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's settlement, while Hannah spoke of her teaching experiences and her hopes for her new position. They discovered a shared love of literature. Ike had been educated through his mother's insistence, though he claimed to have forgotten most of it in favor of practical knowledge. "I doubt that," Hannah said when he made this claim. "No one who can quote Wordsworth has forgotten his education." Ike looked surprised that she had caught the reference he'd made earlier. "You have a sharp ear, Miss Morgan." "Hannah," she corrected him softly. "After all we've shared, surely we can use Christian names." His eyes met hers then, blue and intent. "Hannah," he repeated, the name sounding different in his voice, more significant somehow, as if he were claiming it. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities, until the wagon crested a small rise and Whispering Pines came into view. The sight broke the spell, reality intruding once more. The town was much as it had appeared from a distance the day before, a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church with a modest steeple, scattered houses spreading out from the center. It was by no means imposing, yet it represented civilization after the wilderness of the ranch. Ike guided the wagon down the town's main street, nodding occasionally to people who called greetings. It was clear he was known and respected here, several men touching their hats respectfully as they passed. Their first stop was the stage office, a small building adjacent to the town's only hotel. Inside, Hannah approached the ticket counter with confidence that faltered when she saw the agent's expression. "Copper Creek," he repeated, shaking his head. "No, madam, I'm afraid that won't be possible. Stage isn't running there for at least 2 weeks." 2 weeks, Hannah echoed, dismayed. "But I was told it would resume this week." The agent shrugged apologetically. "Bridge is out over Rattlesnake Creek. Heavy rains last week. Until it's repaired, no stage can get through." Hannah felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. 2 more weeks of waiting, of uncertainty, of depleting her meager funds on temporary lodgings. Surely there must be some other way to reach Copper Creek, she pressed. I have a position waiting, could hire a private guide, the agent suggested doubtfully. But that'd cost more than most can afford, and it's still risky terrain with the creek high. Hannah fell silent, calculating rapidly. The cost of 2 weeks' board would seriously deplete her savings, leaving little for establishing herself in Copper Creek. A private guide was out of the question. Ike, who had been standing quietly behind her, stepped forward. When exactly do you expect the bridge repairs to be completed? The agent scratched his chin. Hard to say. 2 weeks is my best guess. Could be longer if the water doesn't recede. Hannah felt Ike's steady gaze on her profile. You have options, he said quietly, for her ears alone. Don't decide in haste. She nodded, struggling to maintain her composure in the face of this setback. Thank you for the information, she told the agent with as much dignity as she could muster. I'll need to consider alternatives. Outside on the boardwalk, Hannah took a deep breath of the warm morning air, trying to steady her nerves. Ike stood beside her, a solid presence that somehow calmed her racing thoughts. The boarding house Martha mentioned, she said finally. I should secure a room there. Ike nodded, but there was a furrow between his brows that suggested he was deep in thought. Let's see to that than to sending a wire to Copper Creek. They should know you've been delayed through no fault of your own. The practical suggestions helped Hannah focus. Together they walked to the boarding house, a neat 2-story building with white curtains in the windows. Mrs. Tilson, the proprietress, was exactly as Caleb had described her: efficient, no-nonsense, with a deeply ingrained sense of propriety that was oddly reassuring to Hannah's Eastern sensibilities. 2 weeks, you say? Mrs. Tilson pursed her lips after Hannah explained her situation. Well, I can certainly accommodate you, Miss Morgan. $7 a week, meals included. No gentlemen callers in private rooms and strict curfew at 9 o'clock. The price was fair lower than Hannah had feared, but still represented a significant portion of her remaining funds. She agreed to the terms, however, seeing no alternative. I'll have your trunk taken up, Mrs. Tilson continued. Room 3, top of the stairs, very comfortable with a view of the street. With her lodging secured, Hannah felt some of her anxiety ease. She turned to Ike, who had waited patiently during her negotiations with Mrs. Tilson. Thank you for bringing me to town, she said, suddenly aware that their time together was drawing to a close, and for everything else. Your family's kindness has meant more than I can express. Ike studied her face for a moment before responding. Let's send that wire before you settle in. The telegraph office is just down the street. It wasn't the response Hannah had expected, but she nodded agreement. As they walked the short distance to the telegraph office, she was conscious of the townspeople's curious glances. A new face was evidently noteworthy in Whispering Pines, particularly one accompanied by Ike Forrester. The telegraph operator, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, took down Hannah's message to the school board in Copper Creek, explaining her delay due to the bridge situation. The cost of the telegram added to Hannah's growing financial concerns, but it was a necessary expense. Now, Ike said when they emerged from the telegraph office, there's something we should discuss. His serious tone made Hannah look at him sharply. What is it? Instead of answering directly, Ike gestured to a small cafe across the street. Let's sit. This might take some explaining. Puzzled but intrigued, Hannah followed him to the cafe. Inside, the establishment was simple but clean, with checked tablecloths and the aroma of fresh coffee. A plump waitress greeted Ike by name and led them to a corner table. Once they were seated with coffee before them, Ike leaned forward slightly, his expression intent. You're in a difficult position, he began without preamble. Waiting here depletes your funds, but reaching Copper Creek immediately seems impossible. Hannah nodded cautiously. That appears to be the situation, yes. There's a third option, Ike said. Stay at the ranch until the stage runs again. No charge for room and board, we have the space, and Martha would be delighted. The offer took Hannah by surprise. It was incredibly generous, yet also fraught with complications. To stay at a ranch with unmarried men, even with Martha as chaperone, might raise eyebrows. More concerning to Hannah was her own reaction to Ike, the awareness that seemed to grow stronger with each encounter. 2 weeks in his daily company might lead her heart in directions wisdom would advise against. "That's very kind," she said carefully, "but I couldn't impose, it's not imposition," Ike interrupted, echoing his words from their first meeting. "It's practicality. You save your funds, Martha gets female company, and the ranch benefits from an extra pair of hands if you're willing to help with light tasks." Put that way, it seemed a sensible arrangement. Yet Hannah hesitated, conscious of deeper currents beneath the surface of this conversation. "People might talk," she said finally. "A single woman staying at her ranch." "Martha's presence makes it proper," Ike countered. "And frankly, folks here have better things to worry about than such matters. But if reputation concerns you, we could put it about that you've been hired temporarily to help Martha with household tasks." The solution was neat, addressing Hannah's most obvious objection. Yet still she hesitated, searching Ike's face for his true motivation. Was this merely the kindness of a decent man to a stranded traveler? Or was there something more, something that reflected the confusing pull she herself felt? "Why are you doing this?" she asked directly, meeting his gaze across the table. Ike didn't look away. "Because you need help and I'm in a position to offer it. Because Martha took to you and her judgment of character is rarely wrong. Because," he paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "Because I believe you belong in this country, Hannah Morgan, though you may not know it yet yourself." The declaration, delivered in Ike's straightforward manner, struck Hannah with unexpected force. In just 2 days, this man had seen something in her that she herself was only beginning to recognize: a connection to this wild land, a potential for belonging that she had never felt in Boston. "I need time to consider," she said finally. "It's a generous offer, but not one to be accepted lightly." Ike nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her caution. "Take today to think on it. I have business in town, supplies to purchase. I'll come by the boarding house this evening for your answer." With that, he rose, leaving money on the table for their coffee. "Whatever you decide, Hannah, know that you have friends at Forrester Ranch." After Ike's departure, Hannah spent the day exploring Whispering Pines, using the activity to clear her thoughts. The town was indeed small, but more established than she had expected. Besides the essential businesses, general store, blacksmith, doctor's office, there was a small library housed in the back of the church, a dressmaker's shop, and even a modest schoolhouse at the edge of town. It was this last building that drew Hannah's attention most strongly. Unlike the grand brick academy where she had taught in Boston, this school was a simple wooden structure with a small bell tower. The door was unlocked, and Hannah slipped inside to find a single room with rows of wooden desks facing a teacher's table. A blackboard covered most of the front wall, and bookshelves lined the back of the room. It was rudimentary compared to Eastern schools, yet there was something appealing about its simplicity. Here, education was clearly valued for its practical benefits, not as a social requirement or status symbol. Thinking of applying for the position. The voice startled Hannah from her contemplation. She turned to find an elderly man standing in the doorway, leaning on a cane. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude," she began. The man waved away her apology. "No intrusion. I'm Reverend Thomas, the circuit preacher, and when necessary, the school board." He entered the room, his keen eyes assessing Hannah. "You have the look of a teacher about you." Hannah smiled at the observation. "I am a teacher, actually. Hannah Morgan. I'm on my way to take a position in Copper Creek, but delayed due to the bridge situation." "Ah, Copper Creek's gain and our loss, then," the Reverend said with a sigh. "We're in need of a teacher here. Last one left at Christmas married a cattle buyer and moved to Denver." This was the second mention of Whispering Pines needing a teacher. Hannah found herself intrigued despite her commitment to Copper Creek. "You have no one for the coming term." "Several inquiries, but no one suitable yet," Reverend Thomas explained. "We need someone with proper training, not just basic literacy. Our children deserve that much at least." Hannah nodded her agreement. "How many students attend?" 28 last term, ages 6 to 16. mostly ranchers and shopkeepers' children with a few from the outlying homesteads. He smiled suddenly, the expression transforming his weathered face. Bright youngsters, eager to learn, the right teacher could make a real difference here. The conversation continued, with the Reverend outlining the school's needs and resources. Hannah found herself increasingly engaged, asking questions about curriculum and supplies, offering suggestions based on her experience. It was only when the church bell rang 3 o'clock that she realized how much time had passed. "I've kept you too long," Reverend Thomas said apologetically. An old man's enthusiasm for education can be tiresome. "Not at all," Hannah assured him. "It's been fascinating. Your commitment to these children is admirable." As they parted at the schoolhouse door, the Reverend fixed Hannah with a penetrating gaze. "Should your plans change, Miss Morgan, Whispering Pines would welcome a teacher of your caliber. The position remains open until the right person appears." The Reverend's words followed Hannah as she made her way back to the boarding house. The idea of teaching in Whispering Pines rather than Copper Creek had taken root in her mind, growing stronger with each step. It would mean breaking her contract, a serious matter, yet if the Copper Creek School Board found another teacher in the interim, they might release her without damage to her reputation. And then there was the matter of Forrester Ranch. Ike's offer of temporary lodging had been practical, but Hannah couldn't ignore the deeper implications. There was something between them unspoken, perhaps even unacknowledged, but real nonetheless. 2 weeks in his company would either nurture that connection or prove it a fleeting fancy born of unusual circumstances. By the time Hannah reached the boarding house, her mind was made up. She would accept Ike's offer, stay at the ranch until the stage ran again, and use that time to consider whether her future might lie in Whispering Pines rather than Copper Creek. Mrs. Tilson was understanding about the change in plans, even refunding the deposit Hannah had paid for her room. "The Forresters are good people," she said approvingly. "Martha Forrester's presence makes it all entirely proper, of course, and it's sensible to save your funds if you can." As promised, Ike arrived at the boarding house that evening. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, as Hannah informed him of her decision. "I accept your offer," she said simply, "if it's still open." Something like satisfaction crossed his face briefly before he nodded. "It is. We'll leave in the morning if that suits." Hannah agreed to this plan, and they arranged a time for his return. As he turned to leave, however, Hannah impulsively reached out to touch his arm. "Ike," she said, using his name deliberately, "thank you, not just for the offer of lodging, but for seeing possibilities I might have missed." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up to her face. The intensity in his blue eyes made Hannah's breath catch. "There are many possibilities here, Hannah," he said quietly, "for those willing to see them." With that enigmatic statement, he departed, leaving Hannah to wonder exactly what possibilities he had in mind, and whether they aligned with the new vision of her future that was taking shape in her own heart. The following morning dawned clear and bright, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Hannah waited on the boarding house porch with her trunk, watching the town come to life around her. Shopkeepers swept boardwalks, a milk wagon made its rounds, and children chased each other through the dusty street on their way to some morning adventure. When Ike arrived with the wagon, he wasn't alone. Martha sat beside him on the seat, her round face beaming with pleasure. "I couldn't let Ike come alone," she explained as she embraced Hannah warmly. "People might talk, you know, though I think such concerns are foolishness out here where practical matters should take precedence over social niceties." Hannah returned the embrace, genuinely glad to see the older woman. "It's kind of you to come, and I'm grateful for your invitation to stay until the stage runs again." "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "We're the fortunate ones getting educated company for a fortnight. The ranch can be isolating, particularly for women." With Hannah's trunk loaded and goodbyes said to Mrs. Tilson, they set off for Forrester Ranch. The journey seemed shorter this time, filled with Martha's cheerful conversation and occasional comments from Ike. Hannah found herself relaxing into the easy companionship. her doubts about the arrangement fading with each mile. Upon their arrival, Caleb greeted Hannah like a returning family member, helping with her trunk and insisting she join them for the midday meal before settling into the cabin again. "Martha's been planning improvements to your accommodations all morning," he confided with a grin. "New curtains, a rag rug she's been saving. You'd think royalty was coming to stay." Indeed, when Hannah entered the cabin later that afternoon, she found it transformed. Fresh curtains hung at the window, a colorful rag rug brightened the plank floor, and wildflowers stood in a jar on the small table. Most welcoming of all was the small bookshelf that had appeared beside the bed, stocked with volumes from the main house. "To make your stay more comfortable," Martha explained when Hannah thanked her for these touches. "And practical too, I've put a writing desk by the window. You'll want to correspond with Copper Creek, I expect, and perhaps with friends back east." The thoughtfulness of these arrangements touched Hannah deeply. In Boston, she had lived in a boarding house for teachers where the accommodations had been technically superior but utterly impersonal. Here, every addition to the cabin spoke of genuine care for her comfort and interests. That evening, as the four of them sat around the supper table, Hannah found herself studying each face surreptitiously, Martha's kind features animated as she described plans for preserving the garden's late harvest. Caleb's open, good-humored expression as he teased his sister about her ambitious canning schedule. And Ike's more reserved countenance, his eyes often finding Hannah's across the table with an intensity that both thrilled and unsettled her. "We should discuss how you might occupy your time here," Martha said as they finished the meal. "I wouldn't want you to feel obligated to help with household tasks, though your assistance would be welcome. Perhaps you have your own projects." "Actually," Hannah began hesitantly, "I noticed the schoolhouse in Whispering Pines needs a teacher. Reverend Thomas mentioned they're still searching for someone suitable." This statement drew immediate interest from all three Forresters. Caleb leaned forward eagerly. "Are you considering applying? That would be tremendous news for the town." "I have a contract with Copper Creek," Hannah reminded him, though with less conviction than before. "But I admit I'm considering possibilities." Her gaze flicked to Ike as she echoed his words from the previous evening. He was watching her with that same intensity, but now she could identify the emotion behind it: approval, and perhaps something more personal that she wasn't yet ready to name. "Contracts can be renegotiated," Martha said pragmatically, unknowingly echoing Ike's earlier statement. "Especially when circumstances change through no fault of either party. The bridge situation might be viewed as providential intervention." Hannah smiled at this perspective. "Perhaps. In any case, I thought I might offer to assist Reverend Thomas during my stay here, organizing school materials, perhaps even conducting some lessons for children who might benefit from not losing 2 weeks of instruction." "An excellent idea," Caleb approved. "The Reverend's been shouldering too much alone, and it would give the town a chance to appreciate your abilities." The discussion continued, with plans taking shape for Hannah to spend several days each week in town while staying at the ranch. Ike offered to drive her on the days he had business there, and Caleb suggested she might even borrow a horse once her riding skills improved. As the evening progressed, Hannah felt a growing sense of rightness about her decision to stay. There was purpose here, and genuine connection with people who valued her skills and company. Whether this was a temporary arrangement or the beginning of something more permanent remained to be seen, but for the first time since her father's death, Hannah felt she was exactly where she needed to be. The next 2 weeks established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Mornings at the ranch found Hannah helping Martha with household tasks needing bread, preserving garden produce, even learning to make soap from rendered fat and lye. These practical skills, so different from the academic knowledge she had previously valued, gave Hannah a sense of capability and self-reliance she had never experienced in Boston. 3 days each week, Ike drove Hannah to town, where she worked at the schoolhouse organizing books and supplies, creating lesson plans, and tutoring several children whose parents were eager for them not to fall behind. Reverend Thomas observed her teaching with obvious approval, and hints about the permanent position became increasingly direct. "The school board meets next Tuesday," he told her at the end of her first week. "They would be most interested in interviewing you formally if you're amenable." Hannah promised to consider it, though in truth her mind was already tilting strongly toward accepting if offered. Whispering Pines had grown on her quickly its citizens friendly without being intrusive. The community needs substantial but not overwhelming. She could make a difference here, she believed, in ways that might have been impossible in the larger settlement of Copper Creek. And then there was Ike. Their time together had increased naturally through the days, as he taught her to ride properly, showed her more of the ranch's operations, and spent evenings engaged in conversation about books, ideas, and the future of the territory. The attraction Hannah had felt from their first meeting had deepened into something more substantial: respect for his integrity and intelligence, admiration for his quiet strength, and an emotional connection that seemed to grow stronger with each encounter. Whether Ike shared these developing feelings remained unclear to Hannah. He was unfailingly kind and attentive, his eyes often following her movements with that same intensity she had noted earlier. Yet he maintained a careful distance, never crossing the line from friendship into anything that might be construed as courtship. Martha, with her shrewd observation of human nature, clearly perceived the undercurrents between them. "My brother's partner is a good man," she remarked one morning as she and Hannah worked side by side shelling peas. "Steady, honorable, not given to hasty decisions or judgments." "He seems so," Hannah agreed cautiously, not ready to acknowledge the personal implications of this observation. Martha smiled knowingly but didn't press further. "Some men, especially those who have lived much of their lives in wilderness, develop a deliberate nature. They consider carefully before acting, but when they do commit, it's completely." The description fit Ike perfectly, Hannah thought. His measured speech, his thoughtful decisions, his careful attention to every detail of the ranch's operations all spoke of a man who valued thoroughness over impulse. As the end of the 2 weeks approached, Hannah received a wire from the Copper Creek School Board. They had found a temporary teacher and, given the uncertain state of the bridge repairs, were amenable to releasing Hannah from her contract without prejudice to her professional reputation. The news removed the last significant obstacle to Hannah considering the Whispering Pines position. The night after receiving this news, Hannah sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple. The beauty of it still took her breath away, so different from the confined vistas of Boston, where buildings blocked all but glimpses of such natural splendor. The sound of boots on the path drew her attention. Ike approached, carrying what appeared to be a small bundle. "Evening," he greeted her, removing his hat as he reached the porch. "Martha sent these fresh biscuits, said you might enjoy them with the wild plum preserves you helped make." Hannah smiled at the thoughtful gesture. "Please thank her for me. Would you like to join me? There's plenty to share." Ike hesitated only briefly before accepting, settling onto the porch step while Hannah arranged the biscuits on the small plate Martha had included. For a few minutes, they ate in companionable silence, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. "I received a wire from Copper Creek today," Hannah said finally. "They've released me from my contract." Ike turned to look at her, his expression difficult to read in the gathering darkness. "And how do you feel about that?" "Relieved," Hannah admitted. "And hopeful. Reverend Thomas has invited me to interview with the school board next week." "You're considering staying in Whispering Pines, then?" It wasn't a question. Hannah nodded, suddenly nervous about his reaction. "I am. The needs here are substantial, the community welcoming, and I—" She paused, gathering courage. "I've found connections here I didn't expect." The word connections hung between them, laden with meaning that went beyond professional opportunities or community ties. Hannah held her breath, waiting for Ike's response. He was quiet for a long moment, his profile strong against the deepening night sky. "When I found you on the road that night," he said finally, his voice low, Something told me your coming would change things. I didn't know how or why, just that it was important." Hannah's heart quickened at his words. Important to the town, to the school? Ike turned to face her fully then, his expression earnest in the faint light from the cabin window. "Important to me, Hannah. I've never been a man for fancy words or quick feelings. But these 2 weeks, seeing you here, watching you find your place among us, it's awakened something I didn't know was sleeping." The simple declaration, delivered in Ike's straightforward manner, moved Hannah more than elaborate protestations of love might have done. This was a genuine connection between two people who had recognized something essential in each other from their first meeting. "I've felt it too," she said softly. "This pull toward you, toward this place. It frightened me at first how quickly it happened, how strongly I felt it. In Boston, such rapid attachments would be considered suspect, even improper." "We're not in Boston," Ike reminded her, a smile evident in his voice. "Out here, people recognize truth when they see it. And the truth is, Hannah Morgan, I believe you were meant to come here to this territory, to Whispering Pines, to Forrester Ranch." He paused, then added with deliberate emphasis, "to me." Hannah's breath caught at the directness of his statement. "Are you courting me, Isaiah Forrester?" "I am," he confirmed without hesitation. "Rather badly, perhaps, by Eastern standards, but with honest intent." A laugh escaped her, part delight, part relief that the unspoken connection between them had finally been acknowledged. "I don't require Eastern standards, just honesty and respect." "Those you have," Ike promised, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Along with my admiration for your courage in coming west alone, for your willingness to adapt to our ways, for the kindness you've shown Martha and everyone else you've met." His fingers were warm and strong around hers, the simple contact sending awareness through Hannah's entire body. "I admire you too," she told him. "Your integrity, your quiet strength, the way you care for this land and the people on it." They sat in silence for a moment, hands joined, each absorbing the significance of this new understanding between them. Then Ike spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "Courtship should be proper, even out here. If you stay in Whispering Pines, take the teaching position, I'd like to call on you formally. Sunday dinners, social events in town, church together." The traditional approach appealed to Hannah's sense of propriety while acknowledging the real feelings between them. "I'd like that very much." "It won't always be easy," Ike cautioned. "Teaching here is demanding work, the winters are harsh, the comforts fewer than you're used to, and I'm not a wealthy man, comfortable but not rich." "I didn't come west seeking wealth or comfort," Hannah reminded him. "I came seeking purpose, a place to belong. I think I've found both." Ike's hand tightened around hers. "I believe you have. And I believe," he hesitated, then continued with careful precision, "I believe we could build something good together, Hannah, if you're willing to try." "I am," she said simply. "More than willing." The interview with the Whispering Pines School Board the following Tuesday was largely a formality. Hannah's qualifications, combined with the enthusiastic endorsement from Reverend Thomas and the positive reports from parents whose children she had tutored, made the decision virtually unanimous. She was offered the position beginning immediately, with a modest salary and the use of rooms above the general store until more permanent accommodations could be arranged. Simplest solution would be marriage, Martha observed pragmatically when Hannah returned to the ranch with news of her appointment. "A teacher with a husband doesn't need separate housing." "Martha," Caleb protested, glancing at Ike's suddenly reddened face, "don't embarrass the man. Proper courtship takes time." Hannah felt her own cheeks warm, though she couldn't help smiling at Martha's directness. The thought of marriage to Ike had certainly crossed her mind, but she agreed with Caleb such things shouldn't be rushed, no matter how right they felt. "The rooms above the store will suit me perfectly," she assured them. "Mr. Peterson says his wife will be pleased to have a woman in the building. She finds it lonely when he works late in the store." The following weeks saw Hannah fully established in her new position and lodgings. The school term began with 29 students ranging from barely 6 to nearly 17 years of age. The challenges were substantial limited materials, widely varying skill levels, and the necessity of teaching multiple subjects across all grades, but Hannah found herself thriving on the work. True to his word, Ike courted her properly. He attended church beside her each Sunday, took her to the harvest social at the town hall, and occasionally appeared at the schoolhouse door at day's end to escort her on walks through town. Their growing attachment was noted with approval by the townspeople, many of whom had long hoped to see the serious rancher find happiness. As autumn deepened toward winter, Hannah's thoughts turned increasingly toward the future. Her feelings for Ike had grown steadily stronger, moving beyond initial attraction into deep respect and genuine love. She believed he felt the same, though his careful nature meant he expressed his emotions more in actions than words, appearing with firewood for her rooms just before an early snow, ensuring she had fresh milk and eggs when supplies in town ran low, standing up for her authority when a difficult parent questioned her teaching methods. It was on a crisp November afternoon, with the first real snow threatening in the gray sky, that Hannah's life took its next significant turn. School had just been dismissed, and she was gathering papers at her desk when the door opened, admitting a gust of cold air and Ike Forrester. "You're early," she greeted him with pleasure. They had arranged to attend a church committee meeting together that evening. "Wanted to catch you before you headed to your rooms," he explained, removing his hat. There was a tension about him that Hannah hadn't seen before, not anxiety exactly, but a suppressed energy that made him seem more alive than usual. "Is everything all right?" she asked, concerned by his unusual demeanor. "Better than all right," Ike assured her. "Just have something important to discuss with you. Thought the schoolhouse might be fitting, education being so central to your life." Hannah set down her papers, curious about this cryptic statement. "What did you want to discuss?" Ike took a deep breath, then crossed the room to stand before her desk. "When I found you that night on the road, you were at your lowest moment, frightened, alone, uncertain of your future." Hannah nodded, remembering all too clearly the despair that had driven her to her knees in the dirt. "I told you to stand," Ike continued, "because I could see even then that you were stronger than circumstances, that you had the courage to face whatever came next. You gave me hope when I needed it most," Hannah acknowledged softly. Ike smiled slightly. "Maybe. But you found your own strength after that. You've built a life here, made a place for yourself, touched the lives of these children and everyone else in town." He paused, then added more quietly, "Especially mine." Hannah's heart began to beat faster as she sensed where this conversation might be heading. "I'm not a man for elaborate speeches," Ike said, reaching into his pocket. "Just plain words and honest feelings. The plain truth is that I love you, Hannah Morgan. I believe we could build a good life together, one with purpose and joy." He withdrew a small box and opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "Will you marry me?" Though she had begun to anticipate this moment, the reality of it, Ike standing before her with love in his eyes and a ring in his hand, overwhelmed Hannah with emotion. Tears blurred her vision as the full circle of her journey struck her, from the desperate woman crying in the dirt to this moment of pure joy. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaiah Forrester." Ike's face transformed with a smile of such unguarded happiness that Hannah felt her heart might burst. He took the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger, the band a perfect fit. "Martha helped with the size," he admitted. "She's been quite certain of this outcome for some time." Hannah laughed, looking down at the pearl gleaming on her hand. "She's a wise woman. I think she saw the potential between us before either of us acknowledged it." "Potential now realized," Ike said, drawing Hannah to her feet and into his embrace. His kiss was gentle yet filled with promise of passion, partnership, and a shared future that stretched before them like the vast Wyoming horizon. They were married on Christmas Day, 1878, in the Whispering Pines Church with Reverend Thomas officiating. Martha had insisted on sewing Hannah's wedding dress herself, a creation of creamy satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, far more elegant than anything available in the local store. "Every bride should feel beautiful," she declared when Hannah protested the expense and effort. "And you, my dear, will be the most beautiful bride this town has ever seen." The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. Hannah, standing before the altar with Ike's strong hands holding hers, felt the rightness of this union in the very depths of her soul. They exchanged the traditional vows with clear, steady voices, then sealed their promise with a kiss that drew appreciative murmurs from the assembled townspeople. The celebration afterward combined Western practicality with Eastern refinements. Hannah had suggested a feast in the town hall, dancing to fiddle music, and a towering wedding cake Martha had labored over for days. As husband and wife moved through the crowd accepting congratulations, Hannah was struck by how completely she had been accepted into this community that had been foreign to her just months before. That night, Ike brought his bride home to Forrester Ranch, not to the cabin where she had first stayed, but to a newly built house situated halfway between the main ranch house and the road to town. It was modest by Eastern standards but substantial for the territory. 4 rooms downstairs, 2 above, with large windows to capture the spectacular views and a wide porch where they could watch the sunset together. "Your wedding gift," Ike explained as he carried her across the threshold. "Caleb and I have been working on it since you accepted my proposal." Martha handled the furnishings. Hannah moved through the house in wonder, noting the feminine touches amid the solid craftsmanship curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on their bed, bookshelves already filled with volumes from both their collections. In the small parlor, she discovered a piano similar to the one in the main ranch house. "How did you manage this?" she asked in astonishment. Such an instrument would have been tremendously difficult to transport from the East. "Connections in Denver," Ike said with a smile. "And a very determined teamster. Martha mentioned you played, and I thought our home should have music." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Hannah's eyes. "Our home," she repeated softly. "It's perfect, Ike, all of it." As winter gave way to spring, Hannah settled into the rhythm of life as both teacher and rancher's wife. The school board had been concerned about her marriage affecting her teaching, but Hannah had firmly maintained her intention to fulfill her contract for the remainder of the school year. After that, she proposed, they might consider a solution that would allow her to continue teaching while accommodating any changes in her personal circumstances. This delicate phrasing acknowledged the possibility that by the following school year, she might be expecting a child. It was a hope she and Ike shared, though they were content to allow nature to take its course in this matter. Spring roundup kept Ike busy from dawn until dusk, while Hannah divided her time between the schoolhouse and learning the skills of ranch management from Martha. The older woman proved to be a patient teacher, sharing knowledge accumulated over decades of frontier living. "A rancher's wife needs to handle everything when necessary," Martha explained as she showed Hannah how to keep the complex accounts that tracked cattle, expenses, and profits. "Men can be taken by illness, injury, or business obligations. The ranch doesn't stop running because the master's away." Hannah absorbed these lessons eagerly, recognizing their practicality and the respect they showed for a woman's capabilities. In Boston, she had been educated but ultimately dependent on male protection and provision. Here, she was becoming truly self-sufficient, a full partner to her husband in every sense. As summer approached and the school term ended, Hannah found herself unexpectedly emotional on the last day of classes. Her students had progressed remarkably over the months, even the most reluctant learners showing significant improvement. The school board had formally requested she return in the fall, with the understanding that her situation might necessitate adjustments to her schedule. "You've transformed that school," Ike observed as they rode home together after the closing exercises. "Every parent in town is singing your praises." Hannah smiled, pleased by his pride in her accomplishments. "The children did the real work. I just provided direction and encouragement." "Like a good trail boss," Ike said with a grin. "Leading the herd where they need to go, even when they don't know it themselves." The comparison made Hannah laugh. "I suppose there are similarities between teaching and ranching. Both require patience, consistency, and faith in eventual results." And both are essential to building the future of this territory, Ike added more seriously. Cattle feed bodies, education feeds minds. Together, they create civilization where there was wilderness. It was this vision of contributing meaningfully to the development of their community and the territory as a whole that had drawn Hannah and Ike together initially and continued to strengthen their bond. They shared not just love but purpose, working side by side to build something larger than themselves. Summer brought its own rhythms to the ranch, haying, fence mending, preparing for the fall cattle drive. Hannah found herself fully integrated into ranch operations now, capable of managing household affairs and assisting with lighter outdoor tasks as well. Her riding had improved to the point that she could join Ike on his inspection tours of the property, giving them precious time together amid their busy schedules. It was during one such ride, as they paused atop a ridge overlooking the ranch buildings and the distant town beyond, that Hannah shared the news she had suspected for several weeks. "I believe we'll need to consider that adjusted teaching schedule sooner rather than later," she said, watching Ike's face carefully. "If my calculations are correct, we should expect an addition to our family around Christmas." Ike's expression transformed from momentary confusion to wonder and then to pure joy. He was off his horse and lifting Hannah from her saddle before she could say another word, his embrace gentle but fervent. "A baby," he breathed against her hair. "Our child, oh Hannah." His voice broke with emotion, and Hannah felt her own eyes filling with happy tears. This child would be born into love, into purpose, into a community that valued education and hard work equally. What greater gift could any parent give? As the months passed, and Hannah's condition became obvious, the town rallied around its teacher and her husband with practical support and genuine excitement. The school board, after consultation with Reverend Thomas and the most influential parents, proposed a novel solution. Hannah would continue teaching with the assistance of 17-year-old Sarah Peterson, who had been her most advanced student and showed a natural aptitude for instruction. "A teaching apprenticeship, essentially," Reverend Thomas explained. "Miss Peterson will work under your guidance, gradually assuming more responsibility as your condition requires. After the baby arrives, you might continue in a supervisory capacity while she handles daily classroom duties." The arrangement suited Hannah perfectly. It allowed her to maintain her professional identity while acknowledging the realities of motherhood, and it provided Sarah with valuable training that might lead to her own teaching career. As autumn painted the hills in gold and crimson, Hannah and Ike prepared their home for the coming child. The second upstairs bedroom, originally intended as a guest room, was transformed with a hand-carved cradle, Ike's work during evening hours, soft blankets sent by Martha, and a rocking chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. "A mother needs comfort while nursing," Martha declared when she presented the chair, her practical nature never far from the surface even in moments of sentimentality. The first heavy snow fell in early December, blanketing Forrester Ranch in white silence. Hannah, her figure now full with impending motherhood, stood at the window of their snug home watching Ike clear a path from the house to the barn. His movements were efficient and powerful, his tall form a dark silhouette against the pristine landscape. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, smiled, and waved. Hannah waved back, overwhelmed suddenly by the journey that had brought her here from desperate tears in the dirt of a lonely road to this moment of complete contentment. That night, as they sat before the fire, Ike rested his hand on the swell of Hannah's abdomen, marveling at the strong kicks of their active child. "Boy or girl, this one has your spirit," he teased, already determined to make an impression. Hannah covered his hand with her own. "I hope our child has your steadfastness, your integrity. Those qualities matter more than any academic knowledge I might impart." Ike leaned forward to kiss her gently. "Our child will have the best of both of us, and a life filled with possibility that neither of us could have imagined alone." 2 weeks later, as a Christmas Eve blizzard raged outside, Hannah Morgan Forrester gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, healthy and strong despite arriving slightly earlier than expected. Martha served as midwife, her experienced hands guiding the babies into the world while Ike paced anxiously in the adjoining room. When at last he was allowed to enter, the sight that greeted him brought the stoic rancher to tears. Hannah, exhausted but radiant, cradled a bundle in each arm, her face alight with wonder and love. "A son and a daughter," she told him softly, "a complete family in one miraculous night." Ike approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid his presence might somehow disturb the perfect tableau before him. "They're so small," he marveled, gently touching each tiny face. "So perfect. What shall we name them?" Hannah asked, though they had discussed possibilities extensively over the previous months. Ike considered the babies thoughtfully. "Matthew for our son," he said finally, "after my father, and for our daughter." "Hope," Hannah suggested, the name coming to her with sudden certainty. "Because that's what you gave me when you found me that night. Hope that there could be more to life than what I had known, that I could stand again despite my despair." Ike nodded, visibly moved by the significance of the name. "Matthew and Hope Forrester," he said, testing the sound of it. "Our future." 1 year later to the day, the Forrester home was filled with light, warmth, and the happy chaos of celebration. The twins, now toddling determinedly from one piece of furniture to another, were the center of attention as family and friends gathered to mark both Christmas and their first birthday. Hannah, moving efficiently between kitchen and parlor, paused to watch her husband lift their son high in the air, eliciting squeals of delight from the boy whose features were already showing hints of Ike's strong profile. Nearby, Hope sat on Martha's lap, solemnly examining a wooden horse Caleb had carved for her. The scene embodied everything Hannah had come to value in her Western life: family bonds strengthened by genuine affection rather than social obligation, celebrations centered on people rather than display, and a home filled with purpose and love. Reverend Thomas, arriving late after conducting Christmas Eve services in town, brought news that added another layer of joy to the occasion. "The territorial legislature has approved funding for a proper school building in Whispering Pines," he announced as he accepted a cup of hot cider from Hannah. 2 rooms, brick construction, with new desks and a complete set of readers for every grade level. The announcement was met with enthusiastic approval from all present. Hannah, who had gradually returned to teaching on a limited basis while Sarah Peterson handled the daily classroom duties, felt particular satisfaction in this development. "Your influence made this possible," the Reverend told her quietly. "Your standards, your vision of what education could be even in a frontier town. The school board's application cited your work specifically as justification for the funding." Later that night, with guests departed and the twins finally asleep after the excitement of the day, Hannah and Ike stood together on their porch looking out at the star-filled sky. The cold was intense but beautiful, crystallizing their breath and making the snow-covered landscape glow with an ethereal light. "Happy?" Ike asked simply, his arm around her waist. Hannah leaned into his strength, reflecting on the question. Happiness seemed too small a word for the fullness she had found here: the deep satisfaction of meaningful work, the joy of family, the sense of contributing to a community's growth, and above all, the steadfast love of the man beside her. "More than happy," she said finally. "Complete. When you found me that night on the road, I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I couldn't see that I was actually at the beginning of finding everything I truly needed." Ike turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "When I told you to stand, I had no idea I was speaking to my future, to the woman who would become my wife, the mother of my children, the heart of my home." He touched her face gently. "I thank God every day for guiding me to that road at that moment." "As do I," Hannah whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "For in finding each other, we both found our true path." They stood together a moment longer, wrapped in shared warmth against the winter cold, before turning back toward the house where their children slept, the house that had become, in the truest sense, their home. Inside, the Christmas tree gleamed with candles, Presents waited for morning discovery, and evidence of their blessed life lay scattered about the twins' toys. Books shared and discussed, Hannah's lesson plans for the new school term, Ike's drawings for spring improvements to the ranch. All of it testimony to a journey neither could have envisioned when fate brought them together on a lonely Wyoming road. She fallen to her knees in despair. He offering the simple command that had ultimately led to a lifetime of standing together.